Okay, today we are going to be talking about UTM codes. This is information that we put at the end of a URL that lets us track with fine detail inside of Google Analytics exactly where that traffic came from. So we'll be able to tell if traffic came from a tweet, or if it came from an email, or if it came from an image click inside of an email, or we could look at entire campaigns that span multiple channels and learn exactly where that traffic is coming from. We're going to hop inside my computer right now. I'm going to go through every aspect of a UTM, and then I'm going to finish off with some best practices and how you can create a UTM code for your own campaigns very easily. All right, so let's get to work. UTM stands for Erkin Tracking Module, and it was something that was developed by Erkin Software and was acquired by Google in 2005. And here is an example of a UTM code, and we can see here we have the URL and then a whole bunch of stuff that happens after the URL, and that's what we're going to be covering today. So there's the URL. This is the website that you're looking to track, and this is what before you used UTMs, this is what you would put out there. This is the link that you would have, and this is where you were sending people. It could be to the home page of a website, or it could be to a landing page on a site. Just using an example.com here. So we're going to the home page of a site. The next thing is the question mark, which you see happens after the URL. This lets Google know that there's a UTM code coming after that question mark. So we have to have that there, and anything that follows is going to be the UTM code. So Google Analytics is going to pick up on that. The other element that we need is the ampersand, or the and symbol. That separates the parts of a UTM code, and we can see that highlighted here. It's used multiple times throughout the UTM code, and every time that you have a UTM an element of a UTM code has to be separated with that ampersand. So if you look at this URL, you can see that it appears a few times as it separates those components. The first thing we're going to look at is the originating source of the traffic, or this is what's known as the UTM source. It's specified by all lowercase UTM_source. And in the UTM source, we're actually going to be looking at the platform. The best practice here is to cite the platform that the traffic is coming from. And in this particular example, we're looking at traffic that's coming from the email program MailChimp. And so our UTM source in this particular case is MailChimp. Now, we're using all lowercase here, and we'll talk about that again later, but uppercase and lowercase makes a big difference in a UTM code. So we're going to, in our UTM codes that we create, we're going to stay consistent, and we're going to use lowercase and throughout. And again, I'll touch upon that in the best practices later. But for the UTM source, you want to get a little bit specific, and you want to cite the actual platform. So examples here might be MailChimp, could be LinkedIn, could be Facebook, could be Twitter, depending on where this URL is going to be used. Now, in this particular example, we're looking at a URL that was placed in an email campaign that was sent out through MailChimp. The next element is the UTM Medium, and this is more of a general channel in where the traffic is coming from. So we don't want to get very specific here, but we want to use things like, and in this particular example, email, or from social media. We could use UTM Medium equals social. If we had a link in an ebook or on a banner, or it was an affiliate link somewhere, we could use those terms as well. So again, we're using this to specify the channel that it's coming from, and this is a more general specification here. In the UTM campaign, what we're going to specify, or what we're going to track here, is our internal name, or our strategic name for the campaign. And in this particular example, we're looking at an example of an email campaign from a newsletter. So the internal name for our strategic campaign is the July newsletter. And the recommendation here in the payload for the UTM component is to use a dash. So you'll notice I'm using the dash between July and newsletter. I could also just butt those up against each other and have July newsletter as one word, but for readability, and I want things to be simple and readable, I'm using the dash between the two. Okay, so our internal strategic campaign, this is our July newsletter that was sent via email through MailChimp. Next is the UTM Content, and this is for isolating different links. This is an optional UTM parameter, and if we had different links or different URLs that were pointing to the same place within our landing page or within our email, or even within our tweet or our social post, we could use the UTM Content to specify which link got the click. So in this particular case, you can see I'm using the UTM_content equals footer text. So this would be a link that appeared at the bottom of this email. And if I had, again, if I had that link that was pointing to a URL at the top, I had it in an image, and I had it at the bottom, I'm interested in knowing which link is going to get the most clicks. So again, this is an optional parameter, and it just gives me that fine detail of understanding which link, if there are multiple links, was clicked. So we like to focus on source, medium, and campaign. Those are the three that are required when we're doing this. And so this is what they look like inside of Google Analytics. And you can see my MailChimp source here through acquisition got 762 sessions. My medium, which was email, you can see here through acquisition, 848. So, the difference here is MailChimp with 762. I might use my email medium in a couple of different ways. I might have had some direct emails that I sent out, for example. So they're all lumped inside of that email medium. But my source, I can hone in on MailChimp, which had 762. Over here, medium, email, 848 total for this particular campaign, which is the July newsletter. And in this particular instance, I'm seeing 209 that came in from the July newsletter from acquisition. But you can see inside of Google Analytics how we can pinpoint the origin of this traffic using those three parameters. So here are some best practices to follow. Capitalization counts, mentioned that earlier. UTM Source equals LinkedIn versus UTM Source equals LinkedIn, lowercase, will show up differently inside analytics. And in 99% of the cases, you don't want those to be separate, because if you're looking at your source as LinkedIn, you want to make sure you're getting all of that traffic accounted for. And you might miss it if you had it capitalized in one of your UTM codes. Be consistent across all UTM codes, and really that just means when you start, you should have a strategic vision for how you want your UTM codes to look. And I always say just keep it very simple as possible and keep it readable so that when you're looking inside of analytics, things are very easy to understand. As mentioned earlier, use dashes in the parameters. And don't repeat parameters is a good tip. So don't have UTM Source and UTM Medium both being email. Things can get very confusing inside of Google Analytics if you start doing that. And it's a requirement to use source, medium, and campaign. And then the follow-on to this, once you get good at using UTM codes, is to use these UTM codes within Google Analytics goals. Or you could even connect your Google Analytics to your CRM, and you can track revenue. So when you can actually pinpoint revenue based on a UTM code, for example, I sent out an email campaign through MailChimp. It was from my July newsletter which was my email, from email. And I saw my revenue go up based on those link clicks and purchases from those link clicks, for example. When I put that into my CRM, things become really magical, because now you're attaching revenue to the links that you're putting out there. So that's really the end of all of this, the end game of all of this, is understanding how these URLs and how the site visitations and the traffic affect your business. Okay, so those are the best practices that I recommend following. And now let's hop over to the tool that I like to use to create these URLs. This is Google Analytics. It's a tool within Google Analytics, and it will help you build a URL. If you're great with Excel, you can use the concatenate command, and you can create a spreadsheet that will create these for you if you wanted. But it's just as easy to hop into here. So let's go ahead and create a URL. So I'm just going to use example.com. My source, MailChimp. which is just like the example that I showed you earlier. My medium is email, and the campaign name, July newsletter. Campaign term, which we didn't cover just a little bit ago, but campaign term references if we were doing a paid campaign and we were looking to track a specific key phrase, a search key phrase within a pay-per-click campaign. In campaign content, let's just mix this up a little bit. Let's say this is an image link. And very simple, here's my URL with the UTM code. So if I were creating a newsletter and I had an image in that newsletter that was a link, this is why I'm using this for the content. So you can see it creates my UTM code here and attaches it to the URL. So now I can just take this, copy it, and that's the link that I will use in my campaign. All right, so there is your overview of how to create and how to use UTM codes. And the most important things here are source, medium, and campaign, and that we will track these inside of Google Analytics. If you have any questions, send me an email or drop me a note. And until we speak, it's Chris Prouty.